Welcome, everyone, to another Conversations in the Void. I am Graybeard, and joined as always with my off-screen producer, Salem. Tonight, I have really special guests, as we do all the time, but I remember seeing this movie distinctly when it came out on video shelves when I was able to get it, and I've been looking for it forever on Laserdisc, but it's only in Japan. But he is a writer, producer, director, and actor with works including The Dead Next Door, Robot Ninja, Horror Vision, and the upcoming Side Effects May Vary. So please welcome the one and only J.R. Bookwalter.
Hello.
How are you doing tonight?
Actor is not something that I would classify myself as. If you've seen any of the movies, that definitely is not acting. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, it's on your IMDb, and I see you in the movies, so
no, I must stop that.
So how are you doing tonight, sir?
Good. How about yourself?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so ecstatic. Like I said, we'll get into it, but I love Evil Dead, and I know you clearly do too, especially from The Dead Next Door.
It was a very influential one. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. But let's get into knowing a little bit about you. So what movie, I know in your bio, you talk about, Dark Shadows, kind of watching that with your mom growing up. What movie really brought you into go, hey, I should make movies?
Well, I think it was Star Wars because I was 11 years old when it came out in 1977. So that was a huge mind blower, as it was for many people that were in that age range. But I was more into science fiction. I would watch Godzilla movies on Saturday afternoons and all that kind of stuff. But the movie that kind of there was a couple movies actually. The first one, which is sort of relevant to what we'll eventually discuss with Side Effects, was another movie that came out the same year as Star Wars, which is The Incredible Melting Man, which I never got a chance to see at the time. I saw it much later, but I remember the pictures vividly in Starlog magazine. This was before Fangoria. But once Fangoria came along, that first issue came out, and there was an article on Dawn of the Dead, and I saw those pictures. Something snapped in my brain, and I was like, oh my God, I got to see this thing. And, and then all of my short films that I were making at that point were all blood and guts and, dumping ketchup on neighbor kids and all that kind of stuff. So that completely changed my course of what I was doing at that point.
Awesome. Did you enjoy Dark Shadows for it was the, horror theme, gothic theme soap opera?
Oh no, I love Dark Shadows. I mean, when I say that my mother introduced me to it, I mean, I was literally, she had just had me in 1966. So I was a baby, and she was basically just, a housewife watching Dark Shadows. So I blame it on her because that was, she was the one that introduced me to it. But then, of course, I found it on my own in syndication later when they started showing it. It was on every afternoon. I'd run home from school just like all those kids did back in the 60s and see the reruns of it. So, of course, yeah. And at this point now, I've collected I have had for years all the DVDs and have watched the entire series, I think at least once, but some episodes more than once, of course. But
oh yeah, my dad watched Dark Shadows when he was growing up, and I found it really interesting. So when they came out on DVD, I'm like, okay, I'm buying these for you for Father's Day.
That's an expensive one. Well, unless you got the coffin box set with all the one later.
Individual ones.
The individual ones. That was a very expensive hobby.
Yeah. But, so you grew up with Dark Shadows. Do you remember what your first horror movie was?
First horror movie. Well, I can tell you, and this is also related to Dark Shadows. Dan Curtis, who created Dark Shadows, had done a TV movie shot on video with Jack Palance of Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's the first thing I remember watching on TV. And something about, there was some scene where Dracula's coming into a room that spooked me so bad I ran into my mother's room. I was like, I'm freaking out. Because I'm not a person, I don't usually get scared easily. Even most horror movies, I'm just laughing and not, I'm not scared. But that's a very vivid childhood memory of that particular movie. Of course, I've seen it since, and I'm like, I was scared of that. It's like, I mean, it's creepy, but that I've seen scarier stuff that hasn't, impacted me at all. So
right, it's just Jack Palance. I think that was the issue.
Yeah, exactly. It was the right time at the right age and all that, I guess.
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, for you, obviously, you make horror stuff. I know you also love sci-fi, as you said as well. Do you have any horror movie or genre or IP that you think is just very overrated? That is like, how can everyone make this like $1 billion franchise?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna piss off some people. Lord of the Rings just doesn't do anything for me. I mean, I even went back in the 70s, or what was it, 70s or 80s, when they made the animated movie. Just was never into it. I tried reading the books, just never got into it. The Hobbit, all that stuff. It just, the fantasy stuff just doesn't. Again, that's more, I guess, fantasy than sci-fi, but just doesn't do anything for me. Star Trek's and then I'm sort of like a casual fan of Star Trek. I mean, I watched the reruns of the original series.
Right.
I've very just maybe seen a few episodes of any of the other series after that. You know, all the movies. You know, some of those are really good. Some of them are not good. But I was never a Trekkie. You know, I was more into like I said, I was more into Star Wars. Space 1999 was a big one for me. You know, but yeah, I would say Star Trek and Lord of the Rings are probably the two enormous ones that everybody's like, oh my God, they lose their mind over them. You know, not that.
Right. Now, what about on the horror side? Is there anything on like the horror? Like for us here at the Conversation Boy and Pile Night, we think the Exorcist franchise is very overrated.
Well, I mean, not the first one. You can't feel that way about, can you? I mean,
it's a product of its time. Is it the scariest movie ever made? No.
Well, I think it probably was at that time.
At that time, yeah.
I would say probably. Gosh, there's probably a lot of more recent stuff that I think, you know, like a lot of the like I've only seen the first Paranormal Activity, but I think those are like all that Blair Witch Project, all that stuff. I'm just not, you know, it's not my cup of tea necessarily. I can applaud the effort that goes into it, but they don't do anything for me.
Right. What about the reverse? Is there any horror IP or franchise that you think is very underrated that you wish more people knew about?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, one would be Frank Henenlotter's Basket Case.
Yes.
I always think, you know, they reboot all these movies that don't need rebooted, stuff like The Fog, and, you know, a lot of stuff more recently. And I always wonder why they don't go back and reboot stuff that was great, but not, you know, didn't have the resources to be right. You know, well made, and Basket Case fits into that. I mean, obviously, I think, you know, Frank Henenlotter would be the first to admit that it was very crude, and they didn't have, that's part of what makes it great. But, you know, something like that. I mean, I hear Barbara Crampton is producing a remake of Tourist Trap. That is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I'm a little scared as to what they're going to actually do with it. But yeah, I mean, those would be good ones. I'm not a big believer in reboots. All that kind of stuff. I mean, unless somebody wants to throw a ridiculous amount of money at me to remake one of my own movies, then I'd be all for it. But
you know, for me, I love Basket Case. Like I said, the first one, 2 and 3 got a little weird with them.
The second one's better than the third. By the time they got to the third, I just was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know where this went wrong. But
now, I thought when I saw Malignant, did you see Malignant?
Yeah, I did see it.
That seemed like it was an updated Basket Case to me.
A little bit, yeah. I've had other people tell me that they thought that too. I mean, I didn't get it as much. I mean, I see where people come up with that, but I didn't think it went far enough. Probably, you know, if you were to remake, do a modern version of Basket Case, it would have to really go way out there to top the original.
Oh, right. Do you think they'd have to stick to the practical effects to keep it good?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you would want to have some digital stuff in there. The nice thing is when it's practical, but they augment it with digital. I think that's more acceptable. It's just hardly anybody does that.
Right. Maybe instead of when Belial is on the ceiling, it's not stop motion. They can do that as the computer graphics.
Yeah.
They keep everything else.
I mean, when he's moving around like that, there's only so much you can do with practical effects. Although I think they probably, if you get, you know, like Stan Winston's group or somebody like that really knows what they're doing, they could probably, you know, they did it in Jurassic Park, so God, right. I'm sure they could do Basket Case up right for sure.
But Basket Case was so good because that had the seedy underbelly of Times Square in the 80s, which is very different now.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the problem with it is where would you set it, because it's not, New York is not the same as it. I mean, to me, it's New York. It has always and will always be a seedy underbelly. Not a big fan of New York, but yeah, that vibe is totally gone. So they would have to, you know, that would require some thought as to where they're going to set it, I guess.
Yeah, or just set it in the 80s again.
I mean, that'd probably be the best way to do it, honestly.
For sure. Well, it sounds like you should do a Basket Case movie next.
Well, I've never really done a sequel to any of my own movies. I mean, I worked for Full Moon for 5 years, and I did Witch 2 and 3, but I did not make the first one, so that I don't really count that. But sequels and remakes is something it would be new territory for me. So I'd be very nervous to do that, because you got, even if it's just Basket Case, enough people know that movie that there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it, and a lot of, that's a little too much pressure, I think.
Right.
I don't know. I think if any movie deserves a remake, that's one, more so than almost everything that they've been remaking.
Oh yeah, for sure. I completely agree. So how did you get into filmmaking? What is there a movie you talk about what you saw in Star Wars that you want to do it, but like how did you start into filmmaking? Did you get a camera as a kid? Did you go to school for it?
No, it was I met a friend in junior high. We were not fighting over the same magazine, but it had Star Wars on the cover. We kind of both wanted to read it at the same time. Turns out this guy's name is David Barton, and he's ultimately wound up doing a lot of the makeup effects for Dead Next Door and Ozone and some of my work. And he's gone on to work in Hollywood as an effects artist as well. But he was the one actually that sort of came up with the idea. We took our little Star Wars action figures and made little stop motion animation, which is hilarious because we spend our Saturday afternoons and we're working really hard and we're doing this, and then you get the film back. We took it to the photomat, which is then where you drive through and drop it off, and a week later you come back and pick it up, and we see it, and it literally like goes by like whoop, like so fast. And it was like, oh my God, all that work, we spent an entire afternoon and got nothing out of it. So, we were not experts at stop motion animation, but that was how I started was doing that. And then eventually I was able to round up neighbor kids to do it. I did like a little Incredible Shrinking Man thing, like 3-minute thing where I was the guy that walks out and I get zapped by some lightning bolt, and then I turn into it was basically the Luke Skywalker action figure. Animating or walking, that was the Shrinking Man. So it was stuff like that until, like I said, when I saw those pictures from Dawn of the Dead in Fangoria #1, that then everything became like the Flesh Eater and all the I still did some science fiction stuff, but I was doing a lot of crazy zombie and horror movies, one of which was called Zombie, of course, after the Lucio Fulci movie, but that actually introduced 2 characters who wound up being repeated. And when I first wrote The Dead Next Door, the idea was I was going to do a sequel to that short film. It really had no plot or anything. It was silent and all that, but that was kind of the impetus of it. Dr. Bo and Anna, those 2 characters from Dead Next Door, were first used in that short film in 1980, years before The Dead Next Door. So
nice. So like I said, I re-rocked Dead Next Door just in prep for this interview, just because it pops up all the time. So I collect Laserdiscs, and so is my producer, and we just like collecting horror movies on that. It's kind of like what we like to do. Your movie Dead Next Door is only available in Japan,
and that's the only one of my movies that's ever come out on Laserdisc, and I should have a couple copies of it still. But that's nearly impossible to find. But I actually had somebody come up to me recently at some appearance, I don't remember where it was, but with one of those to sign. That's the only time I've ever seen anybody that actually owned it besides me.
Now, how do you feel, and that's how Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell feel about it saying in Japan it says another Evil Dead?
Next door. That was definitely not my idea. It was not not a good idea in my opinion, but they did what they felt they needed to do to sell it, because obviously Evil Dead was, it's not like that was the only time somebody tacked Evil Dead on.
Oh yeah, like La Casa in Italy did like 5 of them or something like that.
There was other movies where they literally had it in the title, because you can't do anything with the Evil Dead. It's like, unless you're trademarking it, it's not like Star Wars where you can go, oh my gosh, that's a trademark. But yeah, so no, I was not a fan. I don't know, I never discussed it with Sam, but I'm sure he was not happy about it either.
So, like I said, we talked before. Like I said, huge Evil Dead fan. I can clearly tell you are, because, like I said, Dead Next Door, you're watching Evil Dead in there. You have Raimi, you have Carpenter, Bruce Campbell does a couple voiceovers as well. How did that? I know there's some snippets of how that came to be. Like, how did that come to be? Like, how did you meet Sam Raimi, and how did this happen?
Well, I've told this story a million times, but the short version of it is I was attending the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, taking photography classes. They didn't have film classes at that time. At the beginning of the second year, my apartment was robbed, so I moved back home with my mother and was just being a bum. And had been thumbing through some back issues of Fango, and there was talk about them doing an Evil Dead 2, and I remembered, oh yeah, they're in Detroit, which is only like 3 or 4 hours north of the Akron area. So I literally called director assistants, and my whole idea, I called for Renaissance Pictures number. I got the number, I called and left the message, and I just wanted to be a production assistant on Evil Dead 2. I figured at some point my mother's gonna kick me out of the house if I don't do something. So I had no ambitions to do anything more than that. So to my surprise, a few days later, Sam actually called and asked for me. And after I scraped myself up off the floor, we had a conversation, and he put me on with Bruce Campbell, who does all their hiring. And, he was like, yeah, here's the schedule, and come on up in a week or something, or whatever it was. So I went up there, I drove up there with my Super 8 projector and a selection of my Super 8 short films, and showed them that stuff. And the long and the short of it is, Sam wound up asking me, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm trying to get a job on your movie. It was a little bit early. They weren't crewing up for it yet, but it was the one that started, I think you should make your own movie. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, if you get something together, let me know, and I might kick some money in. So on the way back from Detroit, I drove, that 3 or 4 hours is when I came up with the idea for Dead Next Door. I came back to Akron, wrote up the script, did a little investment proposal, sent it to him, and to my surprise, he was a man of his word and followed through with it. So it wasn't all peaches and cream. It wound up taking like 4 years to make, and it was, we spent a lot more money than we had initially intended to. But it got done, and it's, the proof is out there. It's a movie.
Yeah. That I mean, to me, that's just really interesting that you're able to just do that. That you just call it back.
Well, I always wonder, we did that a lot. Like David Barton and I would do that in high school. Like we would call like Dick Smith, the legendary makeup effects. He would talk to us for hours and share. I mean, he was talking about stuff that would like go way over our heads. And we would do it with Tom Savini. We wound up going to visit Tom at his house, his father's house in Pittsburgh when we were in high school. I mean, it just back in those days, you could just do it because nobody thought to have an unlisted number. All this information was just available. But I always wondered how many people, after they heard that story, wound up harassing Sam trying to do the same thing. That's a one-time deal. That's not going to happen again. So,
right. Now, for any of your movies altogether, do you think maybe it was Dead Next Door, maybe something else? What was the most difficult scene you think to shoot, and because of special effects, because of settings, or anything like that for you?
I don't know if I would go into all the movies, but I mean the Dead Next Door in particular, we had what we called a big day, where we shot. There's the scene at the very end of the opening titles where it looks like it's a helicopter. It's actually a plane landing on a little airstrip, but where you see the Akron and there's 300 zombie extras out there. And at that same day, we shot that shot, and we did some shots around with all that we had literally had 300 extras, and we would cycle them around doing all these big exterior shots, most of which are in the opening credits. So that was probably logistically the most difficult day, although everything went off without a hitch. So it certainly wasn't the worst day of shooting. There were plenty of those too. Plenty of those over the years.
Right. I mean, for being kind of like your really first feature film, I mean, that seems like a daunting task to have that many people on set.
The thing is, I was 19 when I started that, and I always tell people, when they ask me, about making movies, I'm like, you got to do it when you're young, because you don't know any better. You're just stupid and naive, and you don't take no for an answer, and you're just gonna, because I had older guys that were in the area that did industrial films and stuff. They're like, you can't make a feature. What are you doing? You can't do this. And I just didn't know any better. So, I was like, okay, here's my script. I gotta, this is what I gotta do. Same, we shot at zombies on the White House fence, which is a legendary story, but that was something that we were not supposed to do, and we went and we did it. And you couldn't do it today if you'd be shot probably, but so I mean that's the thing. When you're young, you take those risks. I'm 57 now. I would not take a lot of those.
Yeah, for sure. I talk to people. My co-host and we've been writing some scripts. I've been doing some small found footage indie horror movies and writing stuff and prepping for stuff like that. But that seems just like insane to do at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that even a movie that is not very good, there's somebody put a lot of work into it. Just the planning and the shooting and post-production, I mean, even the worst movie that you've ever seen had a lot of people that probably were putting their heart and soul into it. And that's why it, you try to appreciate everything that you see, because it's like, well, somebody put some, some labor in it. I mean, I've seen movies where it looked like people put no effort and no, love into it. Those, for the most part, I think people have genuine intentions, and just sometimes I think any movie, no matter how big or small, has the potential to go horribly off the rails at any time. You just never know which way it's going to go. And even if you shoot it and you think you got it, you could still edit it together and go, oh my gosh, this is terrible. You just never know. That's the thing. So
right. So now I know, let's get into kind of side effects may vary. This is kind of like your return to film for the most part, right?
Yeah. 23 years ago, I was working for Full Moon, and I was making a giant scorpion movie. It was originally called Stingers, then Deadly Stingers, and it ultimately came out streaming as Mega Scorpions, which there's nothing mega about it. But that was the one where I just sort of was like in the middle of shooting it and just sort of like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, because I kind of had veered into territory where I was just not making stuff that I was necessarily happy with. It wasn't what is it when I got into it in the first place. So I stepped back, met a nice gal, got married, had kids. I was always doing other things in the business, post-production or distribution. I've never stopped being in the business, but I just had no interest in making anything. And people would ask me, well, don't you want to do it again? I'm like, no. So eventually, I guess, sometime in the last year and a half, I got the brainstorm to, well, maybe I should do it again. I kept seeing a lot of lower budget independent stuff that just didn't seem like it had gotten any better in the 23 years that I was not doing it. And I was like, maybe I need to, as an old man now, just come out of retirement and kick these things in the ass and say, no, I'm joking, of course. But I just felt like it was time again. So I came up with an idea that I liked. I went back to my early inspirations of The Incredible Melting Man, which is essentially what inspired Side Effects May Vary, and just decided to, see if I still had it, I guess.
Right. I mean, yeah, you absolutely. I watched the trailer multiple times. It is The Incredible Melting Man. Just the scenes that you have in there with the bodies pressing against each other and just kind of ripping apart that you see in the trailers. It's just gruesome, and I love it.
Yeah, it's very. There's a lot of stuff in that movie that I probably wouldn't have done when I was younger. I mean, there's a lot of like. Some of the people that have reviewed it on Letterboxd have said it's nudity. There's like nudity and sex scenes like it was a 90s movie again, which you don't see anymore. So it's got a little bit of everything. It's very weird and kinky, and it's kind of a different thing. Because that was the thing. I was always like, why has nobody ever made something like The Incredible Melting Man again? It's never been done since then. So I thought, I'll just do it myself. Why not? I mean, it's not a literal rip off of The Incredible, and it goes in its own direction. It's, if you've seen The Incredible Melting Man, there's still something to see, and Side Effects May Vary. But as far as the general inspiration behind it, I think it's in that same mold. Like if you love that movie, chances are you're going to love this one too.
And for anyone that hasn't watched the trailer, I do have the link into it in the description below. Make sure to check that out. But for me, you're right. It does look like the 90s horror movies, and I enjoy that, but it also has that hint of social commentary that seems to exist in a lot of horror movies, and obviously this is about the pandemic. This is about getting a vaccination, and the side effects may vary from it. Right. Why do you think social comedy fits so well, it seems like, into the horror genre as a whole?
Well, I always loved, I mean, I did it even in The Dead Next Door. I had like the protesters, protest zombie rights and all. I just that was the one thing I always loved about George Romero's movies is he would always find a way to put that. It was integral to his stories. He would take these little jabs at whatever was going on in society, and I thought, well, maybe I could do the same kind of thing. So Side Effects, really, I mean, it was when we started it, it wasn't going to be set during COVID, and I kind of came up with the idea. I was like, it should be set during COVID because it's a fictional pandemic. It's not really, it's supposed to be the same. But I just thought it was an interesting backdrop, and there was a lot of fodder on both sides of the political spectrum to poke fun at there.
Right. And
I thought it was time. There's been a lot of like sort of COVID-centric horror movies, none of which have been particularly good. So I thought, there's probably a way there's something there, we can do something with it. And, if it's handled right, I think we can And I think for the most part we did. I think we, the one thing I hear from a lot of people that see it is they're like, thank God you finally made a good, like, COVID themed movie. That I've heard it called COVID exploitation, which is a great term. I wish I had come up with that, but I didn't. But it's not like I would make every movie about that subject, but I think it was very fitting in this one.
Right. Yeah. And I think it definitely shows. And like I said, it has, from what I've seen, the good amount of gore. It's to me, I can't wait to be able to see this and kind of get into that. How's the tour been going for you? What's the reception been with the tour?
The thing is, it's so funny because we have a lot of my diehard, guys who have followed me for years that are showing up. And of course, they're probably predisposed to like it, but they've, left a lot of great reviews. And then we get a lot of people coming in that don't even really don't know my work and haven't seen a lot of my stuff before or any of my stuff before, and they wind up loving it. So it's a very interesting dynamic of the folks that are showing up to see it. That was the thing when we designed this whole roadshow. I was like, is anybody actually going to leave their house to go to a theater to see this? Because I keep seeing all these surveys that people don't like going to the theater anymore. And personally, I've kind of fallen back in love with going to the theater, and I take my kids whenever I can. And I really like it, but I know not everybody does, and it sometimes it's human beings can be the worst. You know what I mean? Everybody's talking on their cell phones. It's just you're setting yourself up for a horrible thing. But thankfully, everybody's been very respectful, and most of the theaters we've shown it at are sort of like, put your cell phone down, or we're going to kick your ass out of here. So.
That's the way it should be. Yeah.
a lot of the independent theaters, they take that stuff very seriously. But no, I mean, we haven't introduced it. Probably I would have liked to have introduced it to much bigger crowds, but the people that are showing up are loving it, and they're telling their friends, and they're leaving letterbox reviews, and that's leading to more interest in it. So it's one of those things that's snowballing over time. So we're it's very gratifying to see that people are willing to take a chance with something.
And you're even going, are you actually going to Germany for that film festival too?
Just booked my ticket today. Yeah. I'm going to. Yeah. I've always wanted to go to Germany, so I use that as an excuse. It's like, well, they're showing a movie at a festival, I have to go. And I'll be in Canada next weekend for the Shock Stock Festival. They're showing it there as well. So
nice. That's
broadening out into the international realm.
Now, with that being said, with like The Dead Next Door, and here you're doing the side effects, maybe, do you see any similarities with the streaming services versus the recirculation of the VHS? Do you think it's easier to put out a movie now than it was back then?
It is, but the reason I wanted to do the roadshow was because I didn't want people watching it on their cell phones. I mean, this was a movie like Ozone, which I had made in the mid '90s. Where I not only directed it, but also shot and lit it, and basically did everything, the editing and all that kind of stuff. So I had a very vested interest in sort of trying to present it in the best possible way, and I just felt like, you dump your movie on Tubi, if the algorithm doesn't pick it up, no one's ever going to see it. If people don't go and watch it, then it's not going to get recommended to other people. And so it's the best of times, and it's the worst of times. It's like we live in a great era where anything can get seen, but the problem is audiences are sort of predisposed to either not like new movies or have trouble finding new movies because there's just so much content out there. I mean, I hate to even use the C word, I hate that term, but that's what Hollywood and everybody else calls it. There's so many great TV shows to watch. There's so many movies in the theater. There's just so much stuff that it's a miracle that anybody finds anything. So everybody that shows up for this roadshow, I'm thrilled that they were able to find it and enjoy it. But eventually we'll do the streaming thing. And of course we're going to do a disc release. I shot and finished the movie in 4K HDR. So I'm hoping to do a 4K Blu-ray just because it really that's the best possible presentation. I've watched and showed it to people at my house on my 78-inch TV, Dolby Atmos and all that stuff going. And it really, really plays like a much bigger movie than it is.
Nice. I can't wait. I'll have to make sure I see that when it comes out. You have to keep me posted too. Say, hey, it's available, because I like to do stuff like that. I like to get the physical copies because I'm old and I like the physical copies of things too. While I have streaming content, I just like to do that. And this is why I like to do the show, is get to meet people like you and then get, more exposed to works I may not have heard of necessarily. Sure. And it's just a great way to do this. And I love doing it. But I know you did something kind of similar with someone that's in Side Effects, maybe very Brinky Stevens,
Yes.
that you did back in the day. Is there any chance of, the stock cinema or shock cinema, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a chance of that ever coming back? Do you see the need for it with all the new movies that have come out?
The thing is, at the time that when that was first released, it was like 90, 91 when I first got those 2 volumes. I mean, there were no DVDs, there were no DVD extras. Everybody was just buying stuff on VHS. So there was a purpose for it then. I think now in this day and age, I don't know, because it's, people are used to buying a disc and it comes with all this extra content, the background of the movie and commentary tracks and all that kind of stuff. I've thought about it. I've entertained the idea since I originally Cinema Home Video on the Shock Cinema series, and then I inherited it at some point. So I could very easily do it. And I've done some other stuff. I've produced a documentary on Scream Queens called Something to Scream About, which was on Showtime when it first came out, with Julie Strain, and Brig Stevens hosts that as well. So, it's not like I haven't done that kind of stuff before, but I just don't know if anybody would care nowadays, unless it was something. It would almost have to be a little bit. It couldn't just be talking heads interviews. You'd have to really, almost like short films and other stuff that, to really juice it up. But it would be nice, but I'm not sure. I don't know how it would fly anymore.
Well, I mean, there's I don't know if you watched the series, In Search of Darkness. They've done about all the classic gems of the 80s.
Like 3 of those now, right?
Yeah, there's 3 of them now. And I'm just going through, I'm like writing down all my notes of stuff I missed in the 80s that would never got to my rental store growing up.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, again, going back to, there's so much stuff out there. I mean, I'm not even talking about the new stuff. There's plenty of old stuff. I'm constantly discovering old stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not hear about this?
Yeah, I think you're right with all the content. I think that'd be just interesting to see a guide to new horror movies, new movies.
Yeah, you might be right there, and that would be interesting. So maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not the first time I would be wrong.
I just love learning the in-depth stuff. I love talking to cast and crew. I love seeing all the behind-the-scenes stuff, because it just really shows, especially for indie horror, the passion that goes into a movie. Some people don't realize what it all takes to make a movie.
And I guess now too, a lot of the labels have stopped doing as much of the bonus content. So maybe you're right. Maybe there is an opening there to do stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I know we did all 4 of the Shock Cinemas on a Blu-ray a few years back with a nice slipcover signed by Brink, and it did pretty well. So maybe you're right.
Oh, is that still available on the website to get?
Not with the signed slipcover, but the regular just 1 disc edition it's got all 4 of the discs on it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to definitely check that out. Like I said, I just love everything that goes into movie making. But
and that's like 4 hours of stuff. So there's a bunch of bonus stuff on there too, of course. So.
Sweet. Well, I don't know about you, but this time flew by fast for me. Let's get into some wrap-up questions. We want them to promote with Side Effects may vary and stuff like that. So what's your favorite scary movie?
My favorite, well, like I said, I don't so much get scared with movies. I can tell you probably the original John Carpenter's The Fog probably I definitely had a reaction to that in the theater. So I would say that's probably one of them. I just don't. I don't get scared with movies. I don't watch them for that reason. I mean, most people want to gasp or scream or whatever. I don't know. I always have a different reaction. Like when I'm watching a movie with people and they react scared, I laugh because I don't know if it's a release but I don't really get scared. But I guess I would have to go with The Fog. I mean, that's the one that I remember. The last movie I remember actually being sort of legitimately scared in.
Yeah, as you said,
a long time ago. So.
Yeah, as you said, the remake though was not needed, and we can forget about that ever happening.
Well, that's the thing. I'm reading a John Carpenter book right now where he was never happy with how that turned out. So I think that was why they decided to do the remake. But yeah, I saw it finally the first time recently, and I was just like, yeah, this is not necessary.
No,
this guy clearly did not understand what made the first one so good.
Yes. Let's face it, it's Tom Atkins and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the cast has a big part in it for sure.
Yeah. So I know probably the answer: practical or CGI.
Oh no, practical. Now that said, I will tell you that, and this is an admission here, Side Effects is very much a practical gore show.
Mhm.
However, I met a genius CG artist who has actually worked on some of the Marvel TV shows and stuff, and he augmented some of the effects, and you will never know what he did unless I point it out. When I do the commentary, we'll probably go, yeah, that was augmented. That was, if you saw the before and after, then it would make sense. But he's so good that you just can't tell. That's what I said, man, this is terrible because you're doing all this great work, but nobody's ever going to know what you did because it fits in with all the practical stuff so well. Because with some of the stuff, we were really like flying by the seat of our pants with the effects, and we had a couple of effects artists who they did great stuff, but they were not. This is the first time they'd really ever done it on a kind of level. So there was just a few things that I felt like needed to be juiced up. So I'm a firm believer that you can do practical and have it augmented digitally to make it better, and it will work. And this movie, in my opinion, this movie proves my theory. So now when you see it, you'll have to guess and see if you can guess what was.
Oh, I'll definitely try it.
Now you'll be like, oh, everything was digital. No. Little subtle things here and there.
Yeah. Now, you talked about working on some sequels and stuff like that. You'd have that in place, and you talked about Basket Case. But is there any other IP or franchise that someone said, "Here's $10 million, go make the next Nightmare on Elm Street"? Is there something in the franchise or IP that you'd want to do that with?
The Dead Next Door.
There you go.
Like I said, throw a bunch of money. No, something I love that I would want to see rebooted. Well, I guess I'm going to go back to Basket Case. I mean, that's the one I keep coming back to. I also I'd written a script years ago called Abracadabra, which is sort of inspired by The Wizard of Gore, which was always a movie that I thought had a great idea, but was so poorly executed that it just was almost laughable. But I still say, and I know they remade The Wizard of Gore, and honestly, it was not good. I still think there's an idea there that could be done better. So maybe we'll see. It's kind of Abracadabra sort of was more like kind of what I did with The Melting Man with Side Effects. It's sort of inspired, largely inspired by it, but it kind of goes in its own direction. So that wouldn't be I don't know. As far as straight remake, I'm drawing a blank. I don't know, because I just don't think everything needs to be rebooted.
But would you want to make the next installment like Saw 13, let's say?
No, not a fan of that kind of stuff. Probably, gosh, I'm trying to think. You're talking about something that's already an existing franchise.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I don't think there's anything recently that I can think of that I would want that I've ever like sat and saw it and said, oh my gosh, I'd love to do the next one. That Tourist Trap remake, even though it's not a franchise yet, but
yeah,
I'd love to crack at that, but probably won't happen. But
for sure.
Watching, call me.
There you go. Do you have any advice for anyone getting into the field of writing and directing, producing their own movies? Stop
now and get a job. Because you're just creating misery and pain for yourself. Unless you have very thick skin and are prepared for, because it's multi-level. Because writing anything, making anything, it's almost an insurmountable task, and it's amazing to me that so many people do it because it's a soul-crushing industry. Trust me, it will just eat you alive, and if you're not prepared for it or you don't harden your skin for it, you're gonna have a tough time. Obviously, a lot of people will do it and survive it. So, I don't know if that means that they're stronger or that they have more luck. I don't know. It just kicks you in the nuts all of the turn, and particularly in the distribution side, because you can make a great movie and it can still just not be found or not be discovered. And it's like I'm just telling people they may want to reconsider. Well, here's the thing: do it if you want. Do it if you love it, but don't worry about the financial part of it. If you're doing it just to make money, you're going to probably be disappointed, or you need to get in the adult business because that's where you can make stuff and still. Well, actually, I don't even know if that's true anymore.
Probably not.
So that never mind. That's bad advice.
Yeah, like I said, it's something I'm working towards just because it's been something I wanted to do for 20 years myself. I started writing scripts back in high school.
Sure.
I'm just like, I want to do them.
I mean, you just got to be prepared that it's it's a business that just chews people up and spits them out. That's the thing. It's like part of the reason that I took a 23-year hiatus was because I just felt like that enough was enough. I needed to take a big step back. I like to say, and this is a sort of a knock at full moon, but joking, a loving knock, that I got kicked in the nuts so hard working for Charlie Band that it took 23 years to heal, and that's why I am now back making. It's not true. It's just a joke. But actually, Charlie was great, and working for him he gave us so much freedom to make stuff that not fair for me to pick on him, but. Gotta get your little digs in.
There you go. So, all right. So you ready for your random trivia question?
Well, hit me. I don't know if I can. We'll see if I'm prepared here. I'm ready.
All right. What 2016 movie finds a group of thieves trapped inside a house they are trying to rob and discover their owner is not just a blind, helpless victim?
It's on the tip of my tongue. 2016.
Yes.
2016. Can I cheat and Google it? No.
I can tell you there's a sequel that just came out a couple years ago as well.
Already?
Yeah.
Well, if it was 2016, there's a good chance I probably haven't even seen it, to be honest, because I don't watch a ton of newer stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to even think if I would take a stab at that. Pass.
No worries. All right. Don't breathe. Don't breathe.
Don't breathe. Yeah, no, I haven't seen that. You're right. There is a sequel to that. Yeah. That one completely flew under my radar.
Oh yeah, I think it flew under a lot of people's radar, unfortunately. But that's
and they made the sequel, so obviously it made money.
Yeah,
because Hollywood doesn't make sequels unless they smell money. So
exactly. So give us your pluggables. Where can people find you, your work, and where can watch Side Effects May Vary when it comes out to streaming? And can they, petition to have it come to their city?
Well, the road show is kind of winding down. I'm going to be what's today? April 25th. Tomorrow we're going to be in Detroit. And then the following weekend, May 5th, it's going to show at the Shockstock Festival in London, Ontario, Canada. And then we'll be off most of the rest of May, but then there'll be a couple more dates. Columbus, Ohio in June, the Weekend of Fear Festival in Germany at the end of June. And then I think our last date as of right now is in Schenectady, New York at the Proctor's Theater, where it's going to show in the middle of July. So as of right now, those are the last, five dates on the tour. It's possible, at that point, like I said, it will be focused more on the Blu-ray, and then the streaming will come even much later than that, kind of doing it in phases, withholding it from people intentionally. Actually, the only physical media you can even buy it on right now at the Roadshow, we sell a limited edition VHS.
Ooh.
Literally the only way. And we've sold a lot of them because people they see it and they just go, oh my gosh, I got to have this.
I need one.
Actually, I don't know if anybody's actually watching it, but I assume somebody must have watched it. But
I definitely need one from you.
Because we want people to come out and see it on the big screen wherever possible. I know it's frustrating, but eventually we'll. Yeah, I think maybe probably by the end of this year or in the fall, maybe we'll have some form of disc out. So we'll see.
Awesome. So where can they follow you to get all the updates for?
I'm every. Well, I mean, the Side Effects May Vary movie is the Instagram and Facebook. We have a Threads account. I think I'm on Twitter, Facebook. It's just JR Bookwalter, Instagram, all that stuff. So pretty easy to find if you just Google the name here on the wrong side. This name right here. You'll find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, JR. This is awesome. I'm glad you came on. I hope you had fun.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So we'll see you next time, and make sure to do Lost in the Void. Good night.
All right. Good night.